The snow whispered against the windows as the town of Maplewood settled into a peaceful Christmas Eve. Twinkling lights adorned the houses, their warm glow contrasting against the icy stillness outside. Down a quiet street, a figure stumbled through the frost. A golden-haired dog, thin and trembling, his paw steps leaving faint imprints in the snow. He didn't know where he was going, only that he had to keep moving. The cold gnawed at his bones, and his fur, once radiant, now clung to him in matted patches. He paused by a lamppost, the dim yellow light casting a soft halo around him. His breath puffed in small clouds, fading into the frigid air. As if driven by instinct, the dog lifted his head, letting out a bark that echoed faintly through the silent street. In a cozy home at the street's end, 9-year-old Lucy Wilson sat on the living room floor, carefully placing a star atop a small gingerbread house. Around her, the warmth of Christmas filled the air. Cinnamon-scented candles, a crackling fire, and the soft hum of holiday music. Yet, despite the festive surroundings, Lucy's heart felt heavy. It was their first Christmas without Grandma Rose, the matriarch who had brought light and laughter to every holiday. Lucy sighed, glancing at the candle on the windowsill. It was a family tradition, lit every Christmas Eve to symbolize hope. Quietly, she whispered, "Please, let something special happen this Christmas." Her whispered plea lingered in the air as a sharp bark broke through the music. Startled, Lucy scrambled to the window and peered out. Under the street lamp, she spotted the dog, his golden fur barely visible through the falling snow. "Mom, Dad," she called, her voice urgent. "There's a dog outside. He's all alone." Emily and Mark Wilson, her parents, exchanged a look. Mark, still adjusting the last ornaments on the tree, frowned. "Lucy, it's freezing out there. Are you sure it's not just a neighbor's dog?" Lucy pressed her face against the glass. "No, he's shivering. He looks lost." Reluctantly, Emily pulled on her coat and boots, Mark following close behind. Lucy was already at the door, bundling herself in scarves and gloves. "I'm coming too," she insisted, grabbing a flashlight. The family stepped into the icy night, their breath forming white clouds. Lucy led the way, her flashlight beam cutting through the snow. As they neared the dog, he cowered, his golden eyes wide with fear. "It's okay," Lucy said softly, crouching down. "We won't hurt you." The dog hesitated, then took a shaky step forward. His fur was damp, his paws raw and bleeding. Lucy reached out a hand, and after a moment, he nudged it with his nose. "He's freezing," Emily murmured, her voice tight with concern. "We can't just leave him," Mark sighed, already shrugging off his coat to wrap around the dog. "We'll take him in for the night. But tomorrow, we'll see if he belongs to someone." Lucy beamed as they carried the dog back to the house. Inside, they wrapped him in a blanket by the fire. He curled up, his body still trembling but his eyes filled with a faint glimmer of relief. Lucy sat beside him, gently stroking his matted fur. "I think we should call him Charlie," she said, the name coming to her without hesitation. Emily knelt beside her, inspecting the dog's condition. "Charlie," she repeated, her voice soft. "Well, Charlie, you've had quite the journey." As the night wore on, Charlie began to relax. He lapped at a bowl of water and nibbled on scraps of turkey Lucy offered him. Despite his exhaustion, he kept glancing around the room, as though searching for something or someone. Emily noticed it first. "He acts like he's been here before," she said, her brow furrowing. Charlie had paused by the armchair where Rose had always sat, his nose pressed against the worn fabric. He lingered there for a long moment before lying down at its base. Lucy tilted her head, a curious smile on her face. "Maybe he's looking for Grandma," she said innocently. The words hung in the air, bittersweet and heavy with the absence they all felt. Later that evening, after Lucy had gone to bed, Mark and Emily sat by the fire, watching Charlie doze. "We can't keep him," Mark said, breaking the silence. "He might have a family looking for him." Emily nodded but didn't respond. Her gaze was fixed on the dog, her mind drifting to her mother. Rose had always believed in small miracles, in the idea that love had a way of finding its way back, even in the darkest times. As the fire crackled and the snow continued to fall outside, Charlie stirred. He lifted his head, his golden eyes locking onto Emily's. For a brief moment, she felt something, an unspoken connection, as if Charlie carried with him a piece of something lost. Emily shook her head, brushing the thought aside. "We'll put up posters tomorrow," she said, more to herself than to Mark. "But for tonight, he's safe here." In her room, Lucy lay awake, her heart lighter than it had been in weeks. She didn't know why, but something about Charlie's arrival felt like an answer to the wish she had made. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness before drifting off to sleep. Downstairs, Charlie settled back into his spot by the fire. He let out a soft sigh, his body finally relaxing into the warmth. Somewhere in his quiet, golden eyes, a flicker of purpose remained. His journey wasn't over yet. The morning dawned bright and clear, the sunlight refracting off the snow like shards of crystal. Inside the Wilsons' cozy living room, the fire had long since died down, but warmth lingered. Charlie stirred on his blanket, lifting his head as the sound of clinking dishes came from the kitchen. Lucy was the first to greet him, her steps light with excitement. "Good morning, Charlie," she chirped, crouching to scratch his ears. His tail thumped against the floor in lazy acknowledgement. He looked better already. His coat, though still patchy, had regained a faint sheen, and his eyes no longer carried the same desperate fear. "Time for breakfast," Lucy announced. She darted to the kitchen, where Emily was pouring coffee and Mark was scanning the local news on his tablet. "Did you put up those missing dog posters yet, Dad?" Lucy asked innocently, though there was a note of hope in her voice that betrayed her feelings. Mark lowered his tablet, sighing. "Not yet. I'll print them later today." Lucy didn't respond, focusing instead on fixing a plate of scrambled eggs. As she returned to the living room, she set the plate down in front of Charlie. He sniffed it, then glanced up at her with what Lucy could have sworn was gratitude before diving in. Emily emerged from the kitchen, towel in hand. She watched Charlie eat, her brow furrowing. "Lucy," she began carefully, "you know we can't keep him, right? If someone's out there looking for him—" "No one's looking for him," Lucy interrupted. Her voice was firm, even as tears welled in her eyes. "If they cared, they wouldn't have let him freeze out there." Emily hesitated, but Mark chimed in. "Lucy, it's not that simple. Dogs get lost. Families lose pets all the time. Grandma wouldn't send us a dog just to take him away again." Lucy blurted out. The words shocked even herself. She hadn't meant to say it out loud, but it was what she felt deep down. The room fell silent. Mark and Emily exchanged a look, their daughter's grief laid bare in her outburst. Finally, Emily knelt down, placing a gentle hand on Lucy's shoulder. "Honey," she said softly, "Grandma didn't send Charlie. He just showed up." Lucy sniffled, her eyes fixed on the dog. "I don't believe that," she whispered. "I think he's here for a reason." Later that day, Emily and Lucy ventured outside to play in the snow, Charlie trotting along beside them. The dog moved with more confidence now, exploring the yard with his nose to the ground. At one point, he stopped near the edge of the woods that bordered their property, sniffing intently. "Charlie," Lucy called, and he turned back reluctantly, his tail wagging. As they returned to the house, Emily couldn't shake the strange feeling that had settled over her. Charlie's presence felt too intentional. She found herself thinking of her mother, Rose, who had always believed in signs and connections. "Nothing happens by accident," Rose used to say. Emily had dismissed it as fanciful optimism, but now, watching Charlie settle back into his spot by the fire, she wasn't so sure. That evening, Mark printed the posters, taping one to the fridge and setting the rest in a neat stack on the counter. "I'll hang these up around town tomorrow," he said, though his voice lacked urgency. Emily nodded, but neither of them moved to do anything further. As they prepared for bed, Lucy stayed up, sitting cross-legged on the floor by Charlie. She had brought a small photo album down from her room, flipping through its pages. Charlie watched her intently, his head resting on his paws. "Grandma would have loved you," Lucy said, holding up a picture of Rose laughing in her garden. She always said dogs understand things people don't. Charlie's tail wagged once, as if in agreement. Lucy giggled, the sound light and unburdened, a contrast to the heaviness of the past few weeks. Just then, Charlie perked up, his ears swiveling. He stood abruptly, padding over to the mantel where a collection of photos and keepsakes sat. Lucy followed, puzzled. He nudged a small metal box, dislodging it slightly from its place. "What's this?" Lucy murmured, reaching up to take it down. She opened the box to find a bundle of old letters and photographs, many of them unfamiliar. Among them was a note in her grandmother's handwriting. It was addressed simply to the family. Heart pounding, Lucy ran to her parents' room, Charlie at her heels. "Mom, Dad, look what Charlie found." The family gathered in the living room, the mysterious box now on the coffee table. Emily picked up the note, her breath catching as she recognized her mother's handwriting. The letter read, "My dear family, if you're reading this, it means the time has come for you to find this. Don't be sad. This isn't goodbye. It's a reminder that love doesn't end. It changes form. You'll see me in the little things, in the flowers blooming in spring, in the laughter you share, and perhaps even in an unexpected visitor. Trust in the moments that feel like more than coincidence. They're my way of telling you I'm still here. With love, Mom." Emily's hands shook as she set the letter down. Mark was silent, his expression unreadable, while Lucy sat with wide, shimmering eyes. "Charlie found it," Lucy whispered. "Grandma said he'd be here." Emily pressed her lips together, her thoughts swirling. She didn't believe in ghosts or miracles, but this felt too perfect to dismiss. The rest of the evening passed in a haze of quiet reflection. Lucy fell asleep on the couch, her hand resting on Charlie's side. Emily and Mark sat by the fire, the weight of the day's discoveries settling over them. "I don't know what to think," Mark admitted, running a hand through his hair. Emily stared into the flames. "Maybe we don't need to think," she said. "Maybe we just need to feel." Charlie, curled up by the hearth, opened one eye, as if acknowledging her words. Emily reached out, running her fingers through his fur. For the first time in weeks, a small smile graced her face. The snow outside continued to fall, blanketing the world in silence. Inside, however, the Wilson family felt the faint stirrings of something they thought they'd lost: hope. The days leading up to Christmas slipped by in a flurry of snow and anticipation. Charlie, now fully integrated into the Wilson household, had become more than a guest. He was family. Yet, as the dog's confidence grew, so did the peculiarities surrounding him. It started with the photographs. One afternoon, while Lucy flipped through another old album, Charlie nudged her elbow, startling her. "Hey!" she laughed. But her amusement faded as she noticed the picture he was pawing at. A photo of her grandmother, Rose, holding a golden puppy. The resemblance to Charlie was uncanny, down to the small patch of white fur on his chest. "Mom!" Lucy shouted, running into the kitchen with the photo. Charlie followed, his tail wagging enthusiastically. Emily took the picture and froze. "That's impossible," she murmured. "This was taken years ago. That dog, Mom called him Jasper. He disappeared when I was a teenager. He ran off one winter and never came back." Lucy's eyes widened. "What if Charlie is Jasper?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Emily shook her head, forcing a laugh. "That's ridiculous, Lucy. Dogs don't live that long. But what if he's a sign?" Lucy pressed. "Grandma said Jasper would always watch over her." Emily didn't respond, but as she stared at the photograph and then at Charlie, she couldn't deny the eerie connection. Was it just a coincidence? Or was there something more at work? The next morning, Mark finally hung the missing dog posters around town, though reluctantly. He settled in so well, he admitted as he tacked one to the community bulletin board. "But we need to do the right thing." Emily nodded, though her heart wasn't in agreement. Back at home, Lucy played in the yard with Charlie, the pair bounding through the snow. Charlie seemed younger, his energy vibrant as he darted and leapt like a pup. At one point, he froze mid-step, his nose lifting to sniff the air. Then, without warning, he bolted toward the woods. "Charlie!" Lucy called, running after him. The snow was deep, slowing her progress, but Charlie moved with purpose, weaving between the trees. Lucy stumbled to a halt as she saw him stop at an old wooden bench, half buried in snow. She recognized it. It had been her grandmother's favorite spot, tucked away at the edge of the woods. Charlie sat beside the bench, his golden eyes fixed on something in the snow. Lucy approached cautiously, her breath clouding in the cold air. There, in the snowbank, was a small, wrapped package. It was faded and weathered, as though it had been there for years. Lucy hesitated, then reached for the package. The paper crumbled under her touch, revealing a hand-knit scarf in Rose's familiar pattern. Tucked inside was a folded piece of paper. Lucy unfolded it, her hands trembling. The note read, "For the one who finds it, love always finds its way back." Tears stung her eyes as she clutched the scarf. Charlie nudged her hand, his warm breath grounding her in the surreal moment. That evening, Lucy recounted the discovery to her parents, showing them the scarf and note. Emily's face paled as she held the familiar fabric. "I made this for Mom years ago," she said softly. "She must have hidden it there." "But why?" "She knew we'd find it," Lucy said confidently. "Charlie led me to it." Mark leaned forward, his skepticism crumbling under the weight of the mounting evidence. "This is getting strange," he admitted. "Do you think your mom planned all this?" "I don't know," Emily replied, "but it feels like she's still with us. Maybe she wanted to remind us of that." Lucy smiled, stroking Charlie's fur. "He's like a messenger." Mark chuckled, though there was a note of wonder in his voice. "Well, he's certainly delivering more surprises than I expected." The next day, Henry arrived. It was late afternoon, and the sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the snow. A knock at the door startled the Wilsons, who were enjoying hot cocoa by the fire. Mark opened the door to find an elderly man standing on the porch, his face lined with age but his eyes sharp and kind. "Good evening," the man said, removing his hat. "I hope I'm not intruding. My name is Henry, and I've come about the dog." Lucy's heart sank. "Charlie's not yours, is he?" she asked, clutching his collar protectively. Henry smiled gently. "No, he's not mine, but I think he's connected to someone we both knew." He stepped inside, and as he removed his coat, Emily froze. "Henry?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I haven't seen you since I was a little girl." Henry nodded. "It's been a long time. I was a friend of your mother's. She asked me to keep an eye on her old house after she passed." His gaze drifted to Charlie. "But it seems this little one found his way here on his own." Lucy spoke up, her curiosity outweighing her apprehension. "Do you know where he came from?" Henry hesitated, then reached into his pocket, pulling out a frayed leather collar. It was old and worn, but the name engraved on the tag was clear: Jasper. Emily gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "That's impossible." Henry set the collar on the table. "Your mother always said Jasper would come back when he was needed most. I didn't believe her at the time, but now I'm not so sure." The family sat in stunned silence as Henry recounted stories of Rose and Jasper, tales of unwavering loyalty and quiet understanding. "She believed in signs," Henry said. "She told me that love has a way of finding its way back, even when it seems lost." That night, after Henry left, the family gathered around the fire. Charlie lay at their feet, his golden fur glowing in the warm light. Emily stroked the scarf Lucy had found, her thoughts far away. "Maybe Mom was right," she murmured. "Maybe Charlie's here for a reason." Mark, who had always been the practical one, simply nodded. "He's certainly brought us closer. Maybe that's the miracle." Lucy hugged Charlie tightly. "He's not just a dog," she said. "He's family." Outside, the snow continued to fall, the world wrapped in a blanket of quiet magic. Inside, however, the Wilsons felt something stir, an undeniable connection, as though the threads of their lives had been gently woven back together by unseen hands. Christmas morning arrived with a soft glow, the sunlight breaking through the curtains and casting golden rays over the Wilson household. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the scent of cinnamon rolls baking in the oven. It was a scene of warmth and comfort, a stark contrast to the cold world outside. Lucy was the first to wake, her excitement buzzing as she hurried to the living room. Charlie followed close behind, his tail wagging as if he too sensed the day's significance. Under the twinkling tree, a modest collection of gifts awaited, but Lucy's eyes went straight to the stocking hanging on the mantel, an extra one, new and unmarked, that Emily had added for Charlie the night before. "Good morning, buddy," Lucy said, kneeling to hug him. His fur was soft and warm against her cheek, and as she looked into his golden eyes, she felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. "Merry Christmas." Emily and Mark soon joined, their sleepiness giving way to smiles as they saw Lucy and Charlie by the tree. "Looks like someone's already in the Christmas spirit," Emily teased, her voice soft. Mark ruffled Lucy's hair as he handed her a steaming mug of cocoa. "Let's get to the gifts," he said, settling into his favorite armchair. The family took their time, savoring each unwrapped present and the laughter that filled the room. Lucy beamed as she unwrapped a set of paints and canvases, her parents knowing how much she loved to create. Emily received a new scarf from Mark, and he in turn unwrapped a sleek new set of tools. But as the gifts dwindled, Lucy noticed something unusual. Charlie had wandered to the corner of the room, his nose pressed against the bookshelf. He barked softly, then turned to the family as if urging them to follow. "What is it, boy?" Lucy asked, rising to her feet. Charlie pawed at the base of the shelf, his persistence piquing their curiosity. Mark knelt beside him, running his hands along the wood. "There's nothing here," he said, puzzled, but as he tapped the edge of the shelf, a hollow sound echoed. Emily gasped. "It's a hidden compartment," she whispered. "Mom mentioned something like this years ago, but I thought she was joking." Mark worked to pry open the hidden panel, revealing a small, dusty box. He lifted it carefully and set it on the coffee table. The room was silent as Emily opened it, her hands trembling slightly. Inside was a collection of keepsakes, a locket with a tiny photo of Rose as a young woman, a bundle of old letters tied with a ribbon, and a journal with Rose's name etched on the cover. As Emily flipped through the journal, her breath hitched. "It's her handwriting," she murmured, her voice breaking. The pages were filled with notes, reflections, and messages addressed to each of them. One entry, dated 2 weeks before Rose's passing, caught her eye. "To my dear family, if you found this, it means my little Jasper has done his job. I always knew he had a special role to play, even beyond my time here. Love doesn't end when life does. It transforms, finding new ways to reach us. You'll face hard times, but don't lose sight of the love that binds us. It's the strongest thing we have. And remember, miracles often arrive in unexpected forms. With all my love, Mom." Emily's tears fell freely as she read the words aloud. Lucy clung to Charlie, her heart full of both sadness and joy. Mark, ever the skeptic, wiped at his eyes, the evidence of his own disbelief melting away. The rest of the day passed in a haze of quiet reflection and renewed connection. The journal became the centerpiece of their Christmas, a reminder of the love and wisdom Rose had left behind. Lucy took particular delight in sketching a portrait of Charlie with her new paints, capturing the warmth and mystery in his golden eyes. By evening, the family had settled into the glow of the fire, their hearts lighter than they had been in months. Mark surprised them all by suggesting they forego the missing dog posters. "Charlie belongs here," he said simply. "I think your mom made sure of that." Emily smiled, her hand resting on Charlie's head. "She always believed in signs," she said. "And now, so do I." As night fell, snow began to drift gently outside, blanketing the world in silence. Lucy, still wide awake, whispered a quiet prayer of thanks as she lay curled on the couch with Charlie beside her. "You're more than a dog," she said softly. "You're our miracle." The fireplace crackled, and the family drifted into a peaceful stillness. Yet, as the clock struck midnight, a faint noise stirred Charlie. He lifted his head, his ears perked. From the window, Lucy saw it, a single shooting star streaking across the sky. She gasped, waking her parents with her excitement. "Look," she pointed. Emily and Mark joined her at the window, their breath fogging the glass as they watched the star vanish into the horizon. It was as if the universe itself was offering a nod to the extraordinary events of their Christmas. The next morning, Henry returned. This time, he carried a small package wrapped in plain brown paper. "I found this in Rose's old house," he explained. "It was addressed to your family." Inside was a hand-carved wooden plaque, etched with the words, "Home is where love lives." It was signed simply, Rose. Emily held it to her chest, her tears flowing freely again. "She knew," she whispered. "She always knew." The story of Charlie and the Wilsons became a quiet legend in Maplewood. Neighbors who visited always marveled at the dog's calm demeanor and the way he seemed to understand far more than any ordinary animal. But for the Wilsons, Charlie wasn't just a dog. He was a bridge to their past, a living reminder that love transcends time and space. As the new year approached, the Wilsons found themselves healing in ways they hadn't thought possible. They laughed more, held each other closer, and looked to the future with hope. And every night, as the fire crackled and the stars glimmered above, Charlie lay by the hearth, his golden eyes reflecting the love that had brought him home. Thank you very much for watching the video to the end. If you were moved by the story of the canine hero and the spirit of Christmas that transformed lives, leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and share in the comments what you thought of this exciting journey.